Is there anything better than a big old box of books? Maybe a box of puzzles. This has been How to Sound Like an Introverted Hermit 101. Shortly after I did my road trip last year, where I visited not only a bunch of creative reuse stores, but I also visited a ton of indie bookstores, the lovely Kai from the Book Burrow in Pflugerville, Texas reached out to me, really just wanting to know if I could possibly come visit the Book Burrow at any point. Unfortunately, the answer was no. It's not no permanently. I really hope that at some point I can come visit the Book Burrow, but my travels have not taken me in that direction. I don't know when they next will take me in that direction. If you're in Texas, if you're near Pflugerville, which is just a fabulous town name, highly recommend checking out the Book Burrow. They told me all about what a wonderful, inclusive, and safe space it is for the community and for everyone who works there. And I really want independent bookstores to not just survive, but to thrive. So, although I couldn't visit at the time, or really anytime soon, I really wanted to support the Book Burrow and support Kai and support her coworkers in some way. So I asked if they could give me 5 or so book recommendations right from them, from Kai and from the other booksellers at the Book Burrow that I could purchase from them and read. This was not too long into my reading modern literature, deviation? It's permanent, so I'm not sure you could call it a deviation. But I hadn't read much yet, so I was like, I'm pretty sure you can easily recommend 5 books to me that I have not yet read. And they did. There wasn't a single one on their list that I had already read. So I got myself all of their recommendations. And y'all, this was a while ago now, because at this time I already had just a rather large stack of books on my dresser. It was my to-read pile. I think my last book-related video was all about that stack. I got gunkus in my eyes. Did I just roll out of bed and start filming? Yeah. So I don't really remember what the recommendations were. I have slept since then, which makes this all the more exciting of an unboxing. Ugh. Good Lord. By the way that I was able to purchase books from an independent bookstore in Texas while I'm in California is this website called bookshop.org. I very highly recommend using this if you don't have a bookstore close to you that's like your local bookstore, or if they just happen to not have a book that you're looking for. Bookshop.org. I'm questioning whether it's called that. Is it bookshop.org or bookstore.org? Bookshop.org. You can shop via this website from a specific local bookstore. Like if any of you would like to just give the Book Burrow in Texas a little bit of support, if you have a book that you were already looking for or something, you can get on there and specifically buy from a specific small independent bookstore. Or you can also just buy from the site in general, but anything you buy is coming from a small independent bookstore. Yeah? Very, very highly recommend. You don't have to go on Amazon to get books. You can support small local businesses, even if they're not local to you. Anyway, the 5 books. Here they are. Okay, this is the one recommendation I did remember. The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Honestly, I'm so glad they recommended this because I've never read any John Green book because, during his heyday, well, I think it still is his heyday, but when all of these were coming out, I was the age that I should have been reading them, but that was the period of my life where we were not allowed to read a book if it was not, from a Christian bookstore or stamped with, by a Christian author. So, I remember everyone else my age talking about these, but we weren't allowed to read them, these being, all of his books. I did, however, see the movie. We were allowed to watch the movie, just not read the book. So I would love to finally read a John Green, and this gave me a reason. Thank you for the recommendation. Next up, V.E. Schwab. I recognize the name. That was The Secret Life of Addie LaRue, I think I read by V.E. Schwab. A Darker Shade of Magic. Cool. It's an author I've already read. I thought her writing was very, very good. I don't think I was like over the moon in love with Addie LaRue. So I am interested to see what another book by her is like. This does say book 1, so if I like it, I'm gonna have to get more, I guess. Oh, it says right here. Best-selling author of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Good job reading, me. The Kiterunner by Khaled Hosseini. I have heard of this book. I have heard great things about this book. So again, so glad they recommended it to me just so that it could like get off of my recommendations list and into my hand. Get out of my list and into my hand. When your recommendations list is so long, like the ones that I got from you guys, the spreadsheet that I made, it's nice to have like, I don't know, something that narrows it down a little bit. So I'm very excited to read this. We have, oh God, how do you say that? Another book 1, so I might be committing to a series here if I like it. I'm gonna assume it's Dangerous Assassin by Elizabeth Wheatley. So we've got a few like fantasy, I think these would fall under the fantasy genre, which is kind of good, again, because like so far I haven't really latched on to any fantasy series or books that I've read, you know, other than the classics, Lord of the Rings, stuff like that, which makes me not, you know, gravitate towards that section if I'm gonna go get myself a new book. But fantasy is wildly popular right now, especially with like my demographic. My younger sister is absolutely obsessed with the fantasy genre, so I do want to read more of it and see not what the hype is, because that makes it sound like some like, ew, what's the hype? Like, I don't know, like it's a trendy thing. I think fantasy has been popular for a while now, and I'm sure it will continue to be. But like genuinely see like what is this really strong appeal of this genre. I'm excited to read more. Oh God, this is a big one. Oh, we got another V.E. Schwab. A signed edition. I did not remember that I bought a signed edition. That's fancy. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. So Schwab seems quite popular right now. And these were like the personal recommendations from 5 different booksellers who work at the Book Burrow. It wasn't like one person giving me all 5 recommendations, and it wasn't me going like, give me like what you think is the right book for me to read, or what you think is like the best book or something. It was like, give me your favorites. So this is a really good selection of 5 booksellers' favorite books. And again, it was really cool that I hadn't read any of them. This one I feel like is the one I've been hearing about when it comes to V.E. Schwab, but it is quite a chunk. So there we have it. The 5 books recommended to me by booksellers from the Book Burrow in Pflugerville, Texas. I'm gonna read all of these one by one and give you my thoughts on them, either right after I've read them or all at the end. I don't know. I'll see how I feel about it. We're gonna go one at a time, I guess. So, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. There is only one vampire story of any kind that I can genuinely say I've enjoyed, and that is What We Do in the Shadows. Is it a spoiler to say this is a vampire story? I guess that has to do with how much you know about vampires. In retrospect, it feels like anyone who's into vampire stories knows right away. Yeah? If not, sorry, slight spoiler. Vampire story. And it's not anything against, like, the genre or something. Of course, I did grow up in a family that was like, Twilight is of the devil. It's not anything like that. A long time ago, I talked in a video about how I don't really enjoy superhero movies, and it's because of all the collateral damage, I guess you could say. It's because they have this giant fight scene where you're just supposed to be like, wow, fight scene, cool. But all that I'm thinking about is, oh my God, you just crushed a bunch of people's cars and now they have to get a new car and their insurance is probably gonna go up. Oh my God, you just slammed through a building. That is so much infrastructure that's going to have to be rebuilt on the backs of tax-paying citizens. Or I'll be like, oh my God, you just blasted through a building. There's no way that was empty. You just killed a bunch of civilians. Or there's actual, just like background actors, civilians who are just going down in mass numbers. And like my brain cannot not focus on that. That's all that I'm thinking about is like, what about those people? What about all of the damage and the death that you are causing? And so it's difficult for me to actually enjoy a superhero movie. And the only ones that I'll kind of enjoy is when they make them so comedic, so leaning towards the humorous side that I can kind of be like, this is a comedy, this is a farce, this is a satire. I can slightly shut down my caring about all of the stuff that's being caused that you're not supposed to care about, that they don't want you to care about in the story. They don't want you to care about that. You're supposed to care about the characters that they've put in front of you. You're supposed to care about the leads and all of that. So, like, I think Thor is probably the superhero movie I enjoyed the most. And it's basically that exact same thing with vampire stories, which is why What We Do in the Shadows is the only one I've enjoyed, because it is just so farcical, so comedic. It takes it all the way to the other side where it's like, this is insane. You're supposed to laugh at it. You're not supposed to care. But any like dramatic, serious superhero story, vampire story, I'm like, well, if you want me to be serious and to take this seriously, I'm sorry, but all I can think about is the damage you're doing on the way for background characters, for side characters, for unnamed characters. And it's that same thing with any vampire story. There's gonna be all of these deaths that they cause. That's like, I don't know, I haven't read a ton, but it feels like it would be very, very rare to find a vampire story where a bunch of random unnamed people don't get killed. And my brain just does not do well with this kind of thing because I am just constantly thinking, but you just killed that person. What about them? What about their life? What about their hopes and dreams? And so it really makes it difficult for me to enjoy stories like this. And this is not like a direct criticism of this book. It's not like this one is more so than others. Again, I haven't read that many vampire stories. I think as they go, I think if you like vampire stories, this is probably a good one. Yeah, it's just, it doesn't compute very well with my brain. And like, let's be real, timing doesn't help. I think a big reason why I struggle with stories like this, where there's like collateral damage that you're just not supposed to care about, is because I find it so reflective of reality in a really, really sad way. That like, we are trained basically, and I think it is also just inherent in us because our brains can only handle so much caring, unfortunately, but we're kind of trained to think the same way, to like not care too much about death and damage when it's just people over there, people without names. Let's not think of them as individuals. They're unnamed background characters. Don't care too much about that. Like, our brains want to do that because it's very hard to care. In fact, you cannot care about every death that's happening in the world. It is impossible for you as a human. You can't even really care equally about every unjust death that's happening in the world. Sorry, this is getting really, woo! But like, this is what happens. I read stories like this, or I watch movies where they're just like, all of these things are happening. They're causing damage, and they're causing suffering, and they're causing death, and you're not really supposed to care about that. And this is all I can think about, is like, that's actually what happens in real life. It's like, don't think about that. Don't think about those people over there who are dying because they're far away from you and you don't know their names. So don't think of them as individual humans with lives exactly like yours. And then when you get into vampire stuff, yes, we're going to keep going down this route. When you get into vampire stuff, you have the specific issue that it is directly like the vampire wants to live, and so they must cause death. And my brain is like, why would you do that? Especially when you get into a story that, you know, carries over into modern times more, or is supposed to have like slightly more sympathetic characters. There is inherently this idea of, in order for me to live, you must die. And it's not even a one-for-one trade. It's not like one person must die so that I can live. It's thousands of people have to consistently keep dying in order for you to live, you the vampire. And I'm like, ugh, is there a vampire story? I haven't read that many. Is there a vampire story where somebody gets turned into a vampire and their immediate reaction is, this is not worth it? My life, my immortal life, however long it's gonna last, is not worth taking the life of even one person, and so I'm immediately just gonna like put a stake through my own heart and end this, because that's where my brain would go. I'd be like, what makes me special? What makes you, the vampire, so special and worthy of continued existence that you should get to take away somebody else's continued existence? What makes you so special? What makes your life so much better than someone else's? And what gives you the right to make that choice? So in case all of that wasn't proof enough, this is what's going through my head all the time while reading a vampire story, which again is rare. I haven't read that many, but this is what was going through my head the whole time I was reading this. So unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it very much because it's hard to enjoy something when that's going through your head all the time. But again, that feels to me less a criticism of this book and more just me personally not doing well with the genre as a whole. So again, like if you like vampire stories, I would assume I'm able to kind of pull myself out of my own feelings and say that this is probably a really, really good one. It feels at least different from what I've heard of other vampire stories. The writing is beautiful. I have discovered, sorry, this is going to be another I didn't like it, but it's another I personally didn't like it because of my personal style. V.E. Schwab's writing is very, very beautiful. I would call it poetic. I would call it emotional. Let me see if I can just crack this open and find an example somewhere random of what I mean. I mean, even this phrase, just the simplest short thing, but it has a feeling to it. The sunlight tears her out of her sleep. It's that's like poetic. It's not the sunlight woke her up. She woke up to sunlight. She woke up because sunlight was streaming into the room. The sunlight tears her out of her sleep. That's how V.E. Schwab's writing is. It is all this very emotional, poetic, it feels deeply. I think that's beautiful. And this is not like, this is good and this is bad, or this is right and this is wrong. It's totally a personal preference. In my brain, when I compare that to some writers that I've read recently, specifically Barbara Kingsolver and Octavia Butler, I'm like, oh, there's a very big difference there between like this poetic emotional writing and this more straightforward, I don't know, it's just like a more straightforward style of storytelling on the other side. Again, neither is better than the other. They are just two different styles of writing, and I definitely personally am finding that I lean more towards the more straightforward writing style, and the very poetic and emotional stuff. I recognize its beauty and I recognize how skilled it is and how wonderful it is, and at the same time I don't like fully connect to it. Possibly because I'm just not like this person with big emotions. This reminds me of my little sister. She has big emotions, and when I read this I'm like, oh, this feels like a story she would love. This feels like a writing style she would love, because this is her. This is this fullness of emotion and these rises and falls. And I've always been a person who's more right here in the middle. I don't experience these giant ups and downs. So that was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. Not a favorite for me personally. Not something that I hugely enjoyed for my personal reading style. But even when I'm not like personally enjoying a story, I can still kind of enjoy it from my like technical like writing background kind of side, you know? You can do this with like movies too, if you're a person who's really into how movies are made or like the writing or something. You can watch a movie and be like, oh, I didn't really like that movie, but I still learned things from watching it, and I still like recognize the technical choices that went into it, and I recognize the skill behind it. And that's definitely how it was here. I didn't really personally enjoy this book, but I do recognize the skill of the story writing or the storytelling and the writing. I recognize the skill behind it, and I can understand why other people do. Next. Oh, well, I had a nice big cry at the end of this one last night. Honestly, not mad about it. It's kind of nice when you've just been crying a lot over horrific events happening in the real world to finally have a good cathartic cry over a fictional story, you know? It also got me really thinking about why we cry at fictional stories, or at least why I cry at fictional stories, because I am a very weepy book reader and movie watcher. But that feels like a whole tangent. So I was really interested to see what it would be like to read a book by someone whose voice I know really well. Because I don't think I've ever had that experience before. I haven't read anything of his. I did read Hank Green's books. And then I think the next closest thing is that Julie Andrews actually wrote some like young adult, really young adult, not really quite children. What's in between like a children's book and a young adult book? She wrote some cute little books, novels, and I read those when I was a kid. And I knew Julie Andrews' voice pretty well. Anyway, all of this is to say, I've never read anything by him, but I'm very accustomed to, or like I've heard his voice a lot. And so I was like, is this going to just sound like John Green the whole time I'm reading it? Is that going to be like impossible to get out of my head? And I will say both yes and no. I do think it sounds like John Green. I mean, the first paragraph, I think, sounds the most like him. Late in the winter of my 17th year, my mother decided I was depressed, presumably because I rarely left the house, spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time to thinking about death. Like, when I read that, I read it in his voice in my head. And it definitely continues through the rest of the book. Like, I can so hear his voice. But I didn't at all find it distracting. That isn't what I was, like, thinking about the whole time. I wasn't reading the book in his voice. There were just sentences here and there that I was like, yeah, John Green. What I was more distracted by while reading this is the movie. And this is further proof to myself, although I pretty much already knew this, that I really do always want to read a book before seeing the movie version of the book, or if I have seen the movie of the book, I'm less interested in reading the book. And it's not because of the whole like, oh, the book is better or anything, it's just that the whole time I was reading this, I was picturing the actors instead of picturing whatever I wanted, you know? Like, it had influenced the way that my brain imagined the story. And I watched that movie once when it originally came out, which was, I'm guessing, like a solid 15 years ago now. So all I remember is the two lead actors. I don't remember who played any of the other characters or what they looked like. So then, like, every time they were speaking, my brain kept being like, what did they look like? What did they look like? Who played that role and stuff? Instead of just, like, creating an image for myself. And then I was trying to, like, not purposely, but my brain was doing this without me wanting it to. I was trying to, like, picture the actors who played the lead roles saying the lines instead of just reading the lines myself. Anyway, none of that at all detracted from this being a very good book and me enjoying it quite a bit. It was just a really interesting observation that I was like, okay, like, watching the movie first kind of ruins it for me, just because I want to let my brain imagine whatever it wants to imagine when I'm reading a book, instead of trying to reimagine a thing that I've already seen with my eyes, you know? Overall, amazing story. Yes, very sad. Very worthy of a good cry. I know he's been very explicit that this is a work of fiction, and I'm not at all questioning that, but I do think it says a lot about the influence on this story. That sentence didn't really make sense. I don't think you can know what it's like, really understand what it's like to be a teenage girl with terminal cancer, unless you either are a teenage girl with terminal cancer or you listen to one very, very well. And I think it's very clear from this book that he listened to one very, very well. Anyway, I greatly enjoyed it. I had a good cathartic cry. Nice to have finally read a John Green book. I think we're going back to fantasy now. I think it is safe to say that I am at least beginning to be sure that fantasy is not the genre for me. I feel like it's extra dark today. Oh well. And I know so many of you love fantasy, so I do not want this to come across as a judgment of the genre or a judgment of anyone who loves the genre. It's not that. Everyone just has personal preferences as to the type of entertainment that vibes with them, the type of entertainment they're into, and I am discovering I'm just not into fantasy. It was pretty much as soon as I started this one that, yeah, I was like, I'm just not into this. And it really got me thinking, because I loved fantasy when I was in high school, and like junior high, I think, is when I read the first one. Really, really loved this genre. And so I'm like, when did that change and why? And you know, it was specifically this series called The Dragon Keeper Chronicles that I read first and absolutely adored when I was a teenager. And of course, the main character was a girl about my same age. And it was definitely a time in my life when I was longing for escape and for adventure and for independence. It was a time when I wanted a lot of things that the character either wanted or was getting. So it was very relatable. It was very much seeing myself in the character, and I think that's a big reason why I loved the genre and why I loved that book series in particular. I mean, I remember reading some other ones because, of course, we were limited to only reading Christian fantasy until I got into classics. But I remember reading some other ones that had like a teenage boy as their main character, and I never really grabbed onto those as tightly as I had the ones with a teenage girl. I was looking for relatability. I was looking for stories where I could see myself in the character. And I think that's a lot of what fantasy is. It's this idea of seeing yourself in the main character, and it's escapism, and it's this idea of like dreaming of something adventurous and exciting and bigger, which is all great. And I apparently loved it in high school, and I can totally understand why anyone still loves it at any period in their life. But what I'm realizing is that right now in this period in my life, it's not what I'm looking for. I kind of don't want to read books where I relate to the main character. I think I end up relating to main characters most of the time. That's the thing, is you hear from somebody else's perspective and you end up feeling empathy for them and relating to them in surprising ways that you maybe didn't expect to. but I don't think that I'm really seeking to read books right now where it's like, oh yes, of course I relate to that main character because they are similar to me in whatever ways. I'm really more interested right now in reading books where the characters, especially the main character, are very different from me, and where I can learn about someone else's perspective, whether that's realistic or fantastical, but I want to learn about other people's perspectives. I want to use reading right now as a way to expand my, I guess you would say, worldview, because like everyone's worldview is based on who they are as a person. So I think when you read books that are from a very different person's POV, you're going to learn about their worldview. And like I said, you often end up relating with that, or at least empathizing with it more than you expected to. Anyway, none of this is really about this book, but it was interesting to sit there and think about, like, hey, why was I into fantasy when I was younger, and why am I not into it right now? And I think it really does just come down to that. I'm just not really super interested in I'm not super interested in like escapism right now in my reading. And again, I completely understand why anyone is. I think I seek escapism in other forms of entertainment. But when it comes to reading, I just think I'm more interested right now in learning something through this mode of entertainment about other people, about other cultures, about other life situations and worldviews. Any woozy woozies, yeah, sorry I don't have much to say about it, but there's really no point in me like nitpicking something when the overall genre just wasn't my vibe. We do have, I believe, one more fantasy in this group of 5. I'm assuming the last V.E. Schwab is another fantasy, so I will give it another go. Oh y'all, this book. It's not an easy book to read. Easy on the emotions, I guess. It's definitely worthwhile and definitely a good read. I mean, not only was it incredibly educational as far as history, Afghan culture, Afghani culture? I feel like he mostly said Afghan in this book. Like, there were times that I was getting on Wikipedia and looking up information because there's just so much I don't know here. I would say there's like nothing that I knew here. This is not a culture that we typically know a lot about, despite our involvement in Afghanistan's history. I think a lot of us don't know very much about it. So to be able to learn about that while also reading an engaging story, I think it's really meaningful. And also, like, the story was so engaging. Just from a technical storytelling, writing ability side of things, the story was incredibly enthralling. I never knew what was gonna happen next. Like, I wasn't able to predict where this story was going. I didn't even predict the plot twist. And the last night that I was reading it, I actually stayed up an hour past my normal bedtime without even realizing it to finish the book, which I don't think I have done on a single other book yet. Like, most of the time I'm very aware of time, so even if I'm really enjoying a story, my brain is pretty good at being like, it's probably your bedtime. And yeah, there was just like no concept of that when I was finishing this one. It was just like, I will read until this is done. Yeah, I feel like I don't have a ton to say about it because it's just, it's good. It's good in a difficult way, but that is kind of what makes it good. The author said something in his afterword in here that I really liked. He was speaking kind of in reference to the way that he portrayed Afghanistan and the people there and everything that was going on there. I'm not gonna sit here and get into it. Read the book. But he said, the job of the novelist is not to reassure, exalt, or whitewash. Whether it is to stir uncomfortable thoughts, to probe what keeps one up at night, to explore painful fault lines and plumb for grace and hope. That very much resonated with me, because I think that's what reading is for me. Like the concept of stirring uncomfortable thoughts. I think that's something we need. We need to stir up our uncomfortable thoughts and address them and give them space and be uncomfortable, you know? Plumb for grace and hope. Very well said. Absolutely a yes for me. One more to go. Oh, it's so dark today. I actually kinda liked this one. But only for the first, I don't know, few chapters. I liked the premise, or I guess the world building quite a lot. I liked the idea behind it, and I rather liked the main character right away. But then it kind of went the path of all the other fantasy books that I've read, and then I didn't like it very much. And I was once again considering why I liked fantasy when I was in high school, and I don't like it anymore. And I recalled that the books that I was reading in high school, not only were they meant for teenagers, but also they were from religious publishing to boot. So while they definitely had death and battles and hard, drama in them and stuff, they were not at all what you would call dark. And all of the fantasy that I have read so far as an adult has been dark. Which, it's not super duper my vibe, which may seem strange to you, because this, book was also dark. I think I literally referred to it as dark. And I did enjoy this book, but I have this perhaps strange thing that, I'm pretty sure it goes all the way back. It's just part of who I am, because I remember things from childhood that, corroborate this, I guess. I much prefer to read or intake a dark story based on actual real-life events than one that is entirely made up, entirely fantastical. And I don't entirely know why that is, though I guess I partially know why it is. To muse on it here would be way too long for this video, which I'm sure is already long. But, we've all got our personal preferences for the type of entertainment we enjoy, and that's just a preference that has been clear to me for a really, really long time. And, it's kind of similar to escapism through entertainment and how we all have different preferences for that. I think most people seek out escapism in some form, and for some people that's going to be through the books that they read, and some people that's going to be the video games that they play, and then other people will find escapism in the movies or TV shows they watch. The other day, Matt asked if I wanted to watch Pluribus, and I was like, no, not even a little bit. Because TV is 100% my form of entertainment escapism. At this point, I pretty much only watch sitcoms or cozy competition shows. I've been watching a lot of Jeopardy lately, and I just feel no pull to watch all the murder shows and the true crime and everything that's wildly popular right now. Anyway, all of that is to say, entertainment and art can serve a variety of purposes, and isn't it wonderful that we all have different preferences, because that means that more artists and entertainers get the opportunity to create and have an audience for what they've created. So even though not all of these books were for me, I'm very grateful for the recommendations, and I really appreciated getting to see what other people's favorite books are right now. There's a layer when reading it if I know in my mind somebody recommended this book to me because it's their favorite. It really does mean a lot to me every time somebody gives me a recommendation that's sharing a part of what you love, which is a part of yourself, with somebody else. And that's really nice. So thanks to the lovely booksellers at the Book Burrow for this little set of recommendations. I do think I at least learned from this that I can probably pause on trying fantasy. At least dark fantasy, you know? Games and puzzles. Ow. My wrists are too weak to hold up 5 books. I don't know, because I didn't write it down.